Hello, my fellow Extraordinary Americans. I'm Samaddar, and this is Extraordinary America. What is Extraordinary America about? You see, American identity is about freedom, the opportunity for a better life, and the pursuit of happiness. Welcome to Extraordinary America. Welcome back to the show, my fellow Extraordinary Americans. For today's guest, we have Anika Pavel. Anika is a multi-talented writer, model, actress, and one-time James Bond girl. She is the author of the compelling new book, Encounter with the Future. Anika's unique life journey from her childhood in the Iron Curtain, Czechoslovakia, to her rise as an international fashion model and actress, and now a writer, makes her immigrant story a fascinating one for this podcast. Encountering with the Future is a collection of essays that weave together her experiences across continents and historical events, told with a characteristic wit and perceptiveness. She's an extraordinary American, and I'm glad and honored to have her on this show. Anika, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Anika, thank you so much for taking the time to do this podcast with me. I'm truly honored. And Anika, can you share your journey to me and the audience regarding your time, the journey from Czechoslovakia to becoming an international model and actress?
Yes. Well, my story really started when I was 18, and my mother always believed that travel was very important, and it was she used to say travel is a university of life. And when I was 18, I wanted to travel, and unbeknown to me, the Iron Curtain yoke of the Soviet Union was loosening up a little bit. So I had a little bit of luck there, and I came to England as an au pair. Then in 1968, in August, the Soviet Union invaded Czechoslovakia, and all that freedom was finished, no more. And so I became an immigrant in London, but the Britain said all the Slovak people, anybody from Czechoslovakia can stay as long as they wish, and they can have a work permit. So I started to work in a solicitor's office, in a lawyer's office, and they suggested I send my competition to win an international model. And so I did. I was young and thought, why not try it? My father was a tailor, so I used to always model for him, or he would fit clothes on me that he needed to try on somebody. And so I decided, okay, I'll give it a try. So I was fortunate to be one of the 10 girls chosen for the fashion show. And after that, I still had to work as a waitress. I worked in a shop as a cashier to supplement, because I couldn't be just to become a model. It's a process. You have to build it up. You have to get photographs. You have to go around. It's like really actually a business. When you first start creating something, you have to sell it. And you sell in yourself. You sell in what you can do. And so whilst I was creating my career, creating my little own business, I was working at night, as I said, as a waitress, or sometimes in the shops as a cashier. And little by little, the jobs started to come around, and they started to get bigger. And I started to work in a TV shows, and got a few parts in the movies. And of course, the crowning job was to get the part in a James Bond movie with Roger Moore, which was spectacular. And we would go around England and promote the show, and it opened a lot of doors for me. And that's where I got married, and I came to America. And but my desire originally was I wanted to be a journalist. So writing was always something I wanted to do. And when my modeling career ended, I went to school, and I went back to writing. It was a long process, because it also involved learning really well English. And I have to say, would it not be for the wonderful spell check, I had a much harder time. But with a spell check, it does make it easier, because it's hard for people to send your word to somebody where there's a lot of spelling mistakes, because English language, unlike Slovak, is very, very different in spelling. And so, then I started to send my work to magazines, and they started to get published. And my children always been aware that they are, half Slovak, and, came from Europe, wanted to know about the history of where I wrote about my father's journey, because he was born. Czechoslovakia is a tiny country, and for 1,000 years it was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So my father at school was learning Hungarian, and so it's a long story of people. And then during the Second World War, my uncle was in a resistance, and my grandmother, of course, was even older and came from a very different circumstances. She was very, very poor, and so was my father. My father was one of 14 children, 4 of whom died. 5 came to America, and 5 stayed in Slovakia. And so my aunt came to America and became very successful. Her husband had a business, a car dealership that was extremely successful. And so, that's how it all came up. And so all this I wanted to put down for my now grandchildren. And that's how the book really came about. And I suppose my career in writing started quite a bit late. And so it's a difficult, just like in modeling. When I was 18, you have to go to hundreds of auditions before you really start making any money and become known. And with writing, it's the same thing. And then I decided, you know what? I don't have the time to wait till somebody decide that I am going to be, I'm fine to be published as a book, because book business is a rough business. And so I decided to publish it myself. And so I did everything from editing to designing. I was deeply involved. And so that's really publishing the book. That was my little entrepreneurial background coming back again, because my father used to have a business before the communists took over. And so I always had believed that we are our own creators, and we have to, in America, it's probably easier than anywhere else, because it's a kind of an attitude. Show me what you have. Show me what you've got. And so I wrote a book, and I created it, and I decided, okay, I'm going to show you what I have and see if people like it. And so far, knock on, they seem to like it.
No,
So,
I'm gonna ask you about your book later on in this podcast, but I'm actually very curious, Anika, because your story is really amazing. How you went from Czechoslovakia to England to ultimately America. So, but my question to you is, how did your childhood or under the Iron Curtain influence your worldview and career choices altogether? Like when you finally came out, like well, with regards to the contrast, and how did it influence you altogether?
well, I mean, living under Iron Curtain, people, it's hard for people to understand how we couldn't even travel to Hungary. You kind of locked inside. The Iron Curtain really does describe what it was like. You couldn't travel. We used to, we used to get Elvis Presley was like on anywhere on the radio was practically a miracle. And so as with young people, the more you try to look them up, the more they try to go. But it wasn't until the era of a Dubček who decided that he wanted to have a socialism with a human face. And this area where I was lucky that I was able to, I got a visa where everybody thought I was crazy. But I was determined, because my mother always gave me these books about other countries, and I about traveling, and I wanted to see, when you are 17 and 18, you think you can do anything. It doesn't matter that there's a curtain out there. My father was skeptical, but I was determined, and I was a joke of the town, and I applied for my visa. But I had that luck that it was that that temporary thaw that only lasted really 8 months. But I managed to get out during that time. And then, of course, it all locked up. But then I just had to manage on my own. And surprisingly, I did.
Wow.
So,
Well, so Anika, like there's like your experiences under like one country and experience on another country creates these contrasts, right? For instance, American identity is all about like all about entrepreneurial immigrant freedom, and whereas the countries under the Curtain were quite the opposite. So my question to you is like, what's your opinion and view of the intersection of personal history and political events in shaping one's identity, from your perspective?
well, I think that the political situation, it shapes you sometimes simply because you have no choice. That's when I feel that a lot of people get shaped. But other than that, I think if you really want to do something and it's in you and you are creative and you are willing to work hard, you can do it. You can start whatever you want. We all have in us a talent. Somebody is a singer, somebody is a mathematician, somebody is a physician, somebody is a doctor, and we can all create a life for us that is something we are dream on. And not everybody can be a billionaire, not everybody can create a huge business. But I think that the personal growth is what matters. When you look back and when I think where I came from, what my life was like when I was 5 years old, what my dreams were, how much of those dreams have I achieved? Then I feel to myself, you know what? Your life is really your creation, and it's like business. Everything comes down to creating your life, and in that life you create whatever business or talent, whether it means writing or singing or designing cars. It's up to you. I think we are all entrepreneurs of our own life. We all create our own life, and that's the entrepreneurship. And that is really nurtured in America, I find, more than anywhere else.
So, so Anika, like from your perspective, like you had the darkness of communism and the Iron Curtain, and then on the other side, you saw like the freedom and the adventure that America brings out, and like its entrepreneurial spirit. So, from your perspective, like, what is your opinion on the American dream, and should people in this nation be more grateful for what they have versus taking things for granted?
Definitely, I find people might be a little bit more thankful. And I will tell you something that would describe you, they will describe what I mean. When we were at home in Czechoslovakia as a kids, when somebody did something amazing or somebody ate something, somebody got a cake or got a gift, they wouldn't say, "Oh, it's fantastic, this is great, this is tasty." They would say, "It's America." That was the top. It's America.
No, that's awesome. Like, yeah, like I that's something that I noticed myself when I first came to this country, right? I noticed like I was very grateful for the opportunities, but it's only because I saw the contrast between the rest of the world and this nation, right? It was kind of like you are free to do your own choices, and even if you made mistakes, they were ultimately your mistakes. Like you can live with them, but you were given the freedom to make something out of yourself and make the most out of yourself. And that's what I find that immigrants that come to this country, they actually appreciate what this country has to offer versus people that are already in here. Like they, because if you do not have a contrast, right, you're not going to know what light is if you like what a day is if you don't see the night first. You're not going to know what warmth is if you don't feel cold first. And it's a contrast that makes immigrants from other countries appreciate this nation to like a large extent.
Yes, I agree. And I do think that there was at one time a habit of young students going to Europe. And before they would go either from high school or before they start work after college. And I thought that was great. It died off a lot. Although a lot of them went, had quite a bit of money, but a lot of them went backpacking. My husband came to Harvey, he ended up in England because he went around Europe and he loved London and decided he wanted to stay in London. So he stayed there 5 years. And then during that time we met, and then we ended up in America. But I think that it's important. It's almost like Americans, because they do have it so much easier than a lot of other countries. I mean, look at Ukraine today, and or people in Russia. They're not, allowed. We don't know how much they disagree, and there's many other countries that are even worse. And so I think that it would be good for young people to go and travel, but backpack, not with a lot of luxurious hotels. Just go and take care of yourself and see how the other side live, as they used to say. And that might make young people, a little bit more appreciative and little bit more humble to see how it, it's when I was in London, people used to go to kibbutz. They used to work and build kibbutz. And then there used to be, what was the other one? The young people would work between high school and college, or during the college, they would go and take a job in the various countries. And that they did it also because it helped them with getting good jobs. And it kind of died off. I think that it would be nice to bring it back, as you said, for people to be able to look in a mirror and say, I'm lucky, I'm good.
No, for sure. I mean, contrast is what makes us appreciate and feel grateful for what we have. And so I think that your story, particularly about coming from the Iron Curtain, like it made you more determined to get what you have and be appreciative of that. But Anika, one question I wanted to ask you though is, what are some common misconceptions about the entire immigrant experience that you hope to address for this to those that are listening to this right now?
What are the A lot of times people misunderstand when they don't understand you. And people think that, I find that people either thought that, oh my goodness, they either don't trust you because you come from a different world. And, once if you've been in a communist country, are you really, people actually did think that, you might be somehow here to cause
Like a
mischief.
like a James Bond spy.
Yeah, it's almost like a James Bond. Yeah, and strangely enough, and one time says, "Oh, and you were in a James Bond movie. Wow, how very interesting." And I was like, "Yes." It's kind of a little innuendo, and it's also, I mean, nowadays it's kind of also. I think people don't realize that immigrants actually work harder than anybody else because they start with nothing and they have to work hard, and they're not replacing, they add in. And that's a misconception that I would really like people to understand, that the immigrants are not replacing, they add in. We build in because we're building up America. And when you think about it, right from the start, everybody was immigrant. Thanksgiving, what is the Thanksgiving about? They were all immigrants, and they have been, they were working with the local people, and that's how they survived, working together. And that's
Totally.
what I would like to see, that people would work together and be willing to work together with the immigrants, with the new people, rather than be suspicious.
No, I mean, in today's world right now, in the current political climate, there is a lot of like anti-immigrant bias. I mean, like whether they call it illegal aliens or like legal immigrant, like underlying that is definitely suspicion of immigrants. But we have to realize as a nation that we are an immigrant nation. We come
Right,
from, everybody here is either an immigrant or a descendant of immigrants. Like everybody has that in their blood. Like their
right,
forefathers or the first people that came, like it came from Mayflower, like from the Mayflower thing in 1620 to like right now. Like we all come from immigrant culture altogether, right? But so for the sake of like the nation, Anika, how would you tell somebody about fostering greater understanding and empathy towards immigrants and their stories? From your perspective, how would you go about doing that in this
I
current
think,
climate that we're in?
well, this current environment, I find that people either have an open mind or they don't. But I think that just by work, but show don't tell. That's the way I find it, that we can get over this presumption that people have about immigrants. You have to show them that you've succeeded, you work hard, you pay your taxes, and you help other people. And the fact that I have an accent does not make me villain. And in often you would be surprised, like people look at you askew. I I was the model and I was a good-looking girl, so people kind of swallow a lot of it. But not everybody is quite is the same way, and it's also sad that our visual look should affect people too. And it's the same way, why the person who is not attractive could work equally hard and could be far smarter than I am. And yet people judge. And if you add that you are also an immigrant, then, all of that light starts going on. And it's silly. It's silly. And I speak to people as much as I can. And, and I mean, my husband is born in America, but his father came from Ireland. And he always used to say to me when he came to Boston and he was looking for a job, there used to be signs, Irish need not apply. So it's not just now, it's been there for a very, very long time. And yet, as you said, the people from Mayflower, they were immigrants too.
Yeah.
But people forget, as soon as the accent goes, people look at you differently. I know my children are looked at differently than I am. And I have been in a situations where my children were, especially when they were graduating, and then I come in and my son would say, this is my mother. And they look, like they cannot believe that, this graduate who's done so well, his mother has a foreign accent.
Oh, wow.
But it's not even, they don't even feel like, acrimonious towards me, just shocked that, a foreigner, this accent could produce a person that can be, a kid that is that successful. And yet, why not? Somewhere down the line, somebody in your family had an accent at some point.
No, I
So
mean,
I
for
would
sure.
find that actually quite amusing.
I mean, when I came here, I had a very pronounced accent myself. I mean, it went off over the years, and so it might still be there. But yeah, I do see what you're saying. Like, we should not be judged based on just like us being different or whatever. Like, there has to be a sense of humanism where we have love for all people, regardless of race, gender, caste, creed, because the divinity that is within one person is within all. But that's just my perspective on it, you know?
Absolutely. That's absolutely true. That's absolutely true.
So
I
Anika,
mean, go ahead.
like what advice would you give somebody that's facing significant life changes when coming to a new country as an immigrant and then starting over? Because I know you have traveled from one country to another and you had to start over again and again. So what advice would you give somebody that's in your shoes that's also doing the same thing?
I think that whenever you go, yes, I lived also in Hong Kong, and I think that you try to not assimilate. You should always remain yourself. But I think it's important to try and understand your surroundings, and rather than trying to change it or criticize it, accept it and enjoy it. And I think that when people, I felt this specifically in Hong Kong because there was a lot of people who had a different attitude. But I always said, when in Rome, do as Romans, and enjoy it. And when people see that you want to be part of them, they will accept you. And I find the same thing also in America when I first came to, to Boston, and to when we first had this, we spent summers in Cape Cod. I started to call myself Cape Codder, and then people feel that you try to be one of them, and that's, I think it's the only way to do it, is to become. You don't lose your heritage. I don't mean that you should throw away everything that you have grown up with and what you had, but you it's a fine balance. You have to keep yourself, but you also have to learn, and otherwise you never really make any progress. And we all have to make progress. We all have to ultimately become friends with each other. It's just the way it is.
I mean, it's the ultimate experience of change. You know, like as an immigrant, you're coming to another country. It's a fine line between having an identity that is uniquely yours and assimilating into the country that you're into. And it's something that only somebody that has gone through can understand that. And it is a pretty hard experience, but it also gives you so much experiences that you otherwise would not have. So it's pretty intriguing altogether, you know?
Yeah, I think it is true. And which is one of the reasons why, like my children, of course, nobody would, if you see my children, nobody would expect that they as I said, people go like, wow, that's your mother. And so that's why they asked me to write these stories so that they will remember, so they will be able to tell their children. And so in a family that you never forget that somebody in your family lived under communism and went to different countries and struggled, so that they will, I hope that my grandchildren and great grandchildren as they go on will be this is how you keep it up, so that the generations become more tolerant towards others, because there'll always be new immigrants. And I think that teaching, it is really up to us immigrants to teach our children and people around us to be tolerant to new immigrants.
Mhm.
And I think that's very important.
No, I couldn't agree more. Like you're right, because ultimately it is an immigrant experience that we all have. Like it allows more entrepreneurship and it allows more open-mindedness. Because if we are stuck in one place, we're naturally going to be tribalistic, and we won't have that respect for people of other cultures and other faiths that we could have when we're an immigrant. Because now we know that there are other people outside of the pond. Because if you're just in your own country and then you've never gone outside, you're going to generally be more discriminatory and xenophobic altogether. But immigrants tend to be more open-minded and like more open to other people and more tolerant, which is ultimately a godly thing to do, you know?
Which is what makes America America, the
No, I mean,
country of.
exactly. But Anika, I wanted to ask you, like, I know you've been through these diverse careers. Like, how did you navigate the challenges of transitioning from modeling to being an actress to being a writer and all of that stuff?
Well, I mean, going from modeling to acting, it's kind of a quite a natural process. It's not very far-fetched. Um, but writing, it was really going back to, because I originally wanted to be a writer. And then when I came to England, I very quickly realized that I cannot write in English. And after a while, I kept writing in Slovak, but after a while, as you assimilate, as you become part of the new culture and new language, I started to think in English. And that was the end of my Slovak writing. I couldn't, then I realized I couldn't write in any of them. And then of course, I have thrown myself into my new career. And but the writing was always there. And it was my dream. And I think it was my children who said to me, you were always a storyteller, and we want you to write about your journey. Like, you are asking me the question. They asked me the same questions. How did you go from one to another? Did you, how did you decide to make this leap? And what made you decide not to go back? Because at some point I could have gone back, but I chose not to, because it was partly of fear, but partly I just couldn't live. I just knew I couldn't go back to that restriction anymore. My mind already expanded to a much bigger world, and I couldn't put it into that prison. And so I would always tell those stories, and so that's how it really developed. Then I went to school and to brush up on and learn a little bit more. And but I was writing before I even went to school, and started to write in English. And it's really computers um, that changed everything when I was able um, to correct my spelling as I went along. Um,
I mean, Anika,
and
you not only have you gone from one country to another with the immigrant experience, you've also been through a technological revolution. Like you grew up
that's
with the
the other.
computer, the telephone, the cell phone. Like you've experienced a lot during like your time here on Earth, you know?
Absolutely. I will tell you, when I first, how technology changed. And yes, it was communism, and we were way behind America. But when I first came to England, and I had to send a telegram to my parents because they had no telephone, that I will be calling them at such and such time and such day. They had to go to the post office, show them the telegram, and then send it my telephone number that I was in England, the woman I was working for, she had a telephone. and then they would connect, the post office would connect, and then my parents would go to a little booth, and then we would speak to each other. And it wasn't very good line, but it was hearing my parents' voice. It was very magical for me. And to go from that to cell phones, I mean, it's amazing. I'm glad my parents didn't see it, but I'm amazed that I have seen that transaction. I'm speaking to you and I see you. I mean, can you imagine? It's
I mean,
mind-boggling.
it's normal, right? Like this is how
Yes,
we've always like for me, it's just a normal thing now, and like for like all of the generation, well, like the millennials and Gen Z. But yeah, like for people that have been in before that time, like to see these changes, it's truly amazing.
yes. I mean, the dialing, the phone. I remember somewhere I saw that they gave the rotary phones to a couple of teenagers, and they couldn't figure out how it worked. Which is just amazing. How, but it made me feel good because when I have a problem with the technology, I always thinking, you guys may not be able to do what I did.
So, Anika, for the sake of the audience, can you tell them a little bit more about the story of how you went into a James Bond movie, and what was the process that led to that point?
Well, by that time I was on a lot of fashion magazines on a cover and inside. I did a lot of fashion modeling, and I did a lot of TV commercials. I did almost 100 TV commercials, and a little shows on a TV on a TV. The Turoni show, which was kind of a little comedy. It was nothing big, but my face began to be out there a little bit in London. And so I had an agent, obviously. And so I went for audition and I auditioned for the part. And so that's how like with everything, you go on audition and then you get a part. And, started off on TV, and that was the icing on a cake.
And what was that experience like for you, like being part of like a movie that's like iconic altogether?
Yeah, it's really quite amazing. It's only actually now really I'm beginning to realize, and it is, I'm just so proud that I was part of it, because it is they do such a great job. And it's something that is, sometimes like mind-boggling to me, like I'm part of it. And I'm proud of it. I will say that I'm proud that I have achieved that. And it's neat. As
No,
my
for sure.
kids would, it's neat.
I mean, not many people can say that they've been part of like movies and everything. So it's definitely like a unique experience to become an immigrant, to come out of the Iron Curtain, eventually have all these experiences, and then go from one career to another. It's just like not many people do that. So it's amazing.
Yes, it was funny. I was also on a Benny Hill show, and I remember it was showing in America, and my husband's nieces and nephews just came and they said, "I can't believe it! I saw you on TV." And it just kind of, when you are working with it, you don't really think about it. It's only when you often see the results, it's it's you realize that maybe it is something I should be proud of.
So, Anika, can you tell me, the audience, a little bit more about your book, Encounter with the Future, and what it is about, and what do you hope the readers can take away from it?
I think that the book is about, it's a history of a tiny country, but it's about resilience. It's about dealing with the problems, dealing with the life challenges, and never giving up, and always have a little bit of a sense of humor, and just have a grit. And I hope I make people laugh, and learn about something a little bit different about different country. It's all about the learning, and it's a travel through the book. Um, and I hope that it's about the resilience of people. If you want to do something, you can do it.
No, for sure. And what was like? I mean, that's what's the immigrant story is all about, like us being resilient and determined, and then making something of our life. But what was the premise that got you to write this book in the first place? Like, what inspired you to write this book?
Well, as I said, I have always wanted to be a writer, and I have. How I got really back to it was, believe it or not, through a dog. I adopted a dog called Barney, and he came from Mississippi, and he was the cutest little dog you have ever seen. And I started to think, what made someone give up such a cute little dog? And I started to write, imagining his story. He was my little immigrant who came from Mississippi to New York. And I would write it down. And then the kids started to say, this is cute, this is good. And then I went to school, and I started to learn to write short stories. And I always drew on my life, rather than creating something that, even when I was writing a fiction, it was based heavily on a true story. And although that's what they say, that most writers draw from their own experiences, but I wanted to be more honest about it. I wanted to make sure that since I'm going to do this, I might as well teach some people. Maybe I will put shine a little bit of a light on a experience of emigrating and becoming from immigrant to immigrant.
Mhm.
It's a journey. And that's what I really wanted to do, is to shine a light on a journey from immigrant to immigrant.
No, that's
And
amazing, Anika, and I would definitely want everybody to read this book. So, where can the listeners learn more about your work and also get this book and also connect with you if they want to connect with you?
yeah, well, I'm on Instagram and also on Facebook, but I also have a website, which is www.anikapavel.com. And and I have a page for all my modeling. There's a lot of photographs and magazines, and that I did fashion. And I have also all of my work, not all of it, but a lot of the acting with Benny Hill and with James Bond, and all the other actors that I worked with in London. And then I also have a little bit of a history of my country. But when you come in, immediately you get into the encounter with the future, and you just press the button and it takes you straight to the Amazon, and you can order the book if you wish to read it.
That is amazing, Anika, and I do hope people do that. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this podcast with me and basically sharing your immigrant story and about your experiences. And I do hope that you take the time to come back on this podcast at a later time because what you shared with us is truly inspirational, you know?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I felt honored to be with all those famous entrepreneurial. I'm an entrepreneur of my own life. Um, but I think you had some pretty impressive people. I was listening to podcasts and I was really impressed. So to be amongst such creative people, I find that to be honor.
No, thank you,
So thank
Anika. I appreciate it. And I do want to conclude this podcast by letting my fellow extraordinary Americans know that, hey, look, there's an extraordinary within each and every one of us. And it's our duty to awaken it and unleash it. Until next time, bye for now. Hey, everyone. Thank you for watching Extraordinary America. If you like what you see, please do subscribe to our podcast and share it with others. Remember that the best investment that you can make in your lifetime is in your own financial education, for it is knowledge that truly sets us free. Also, remember that inflation is diluting your purchasing power, which in turn increases financial bondage. The practical thing to do is to protect the loss of your purchasing power and invest in precious metals or the right cryptocurrencies. Lastly, never forget that you are an extraordinary American. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.